This is Joe Mullings with The Other Side. Joining me today is Kristy Kennedy. Kristy is the Chief Business Officer of MedTech Strategist. And as usual, she's joining us virtually. And Kristy, good to see you.
Good to see you, Joe. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. Always a pleasure. And gosh, I miss you. We were supposed to be in Dublin together.
We missed our Guinness and our cocktails and all of it. What happened?
I don't know. You tell me. You and I have been having conversations over the last few months. The MedTech Strategist show in Dublin, I think, is the iconic pound for pound show in the industry. And we can go into that in a little bit. But for maybe just the 1% of the viewers who don't know about MedTech Strategist and who they are and the value that they bring to the market, would you mind sharing a little bit?
Sure, I would love to. And again, thank you for having me on, and thank you what you're doing for the industry. We feel that we kind of, do similar things in a sense, for MedTech and for startups alike and everyone within the community. So we're a publishing company and have been publishing medical device research and information and content, which I like to say since the early 1800s. I mean, through one iteration or another. We do two very highly read publications titled MedTech Strategist and our newest publication, which is Market Pathways, which is a global regulatory and reimbursement publication. So we have been writing on the industry for a number of years, and we try to bring in-depth information and focus to areas that not everybody maybe is paying attention to. We have on-site editors and writers that have been writing on the industry for, again, a number of years. So that is our core publications that we do. And our clients are, whether they're large corporate manufacturing companies or venture capital, investment-based consultancies, and so forth, read our information in order to gain that different kind of perspective and knowledge. Our conferences are built around MedTech investment and partnering, and we've been doing those for over 20 years, these types of events, and we're very, very fortunate to have a large following of folks that come to our meetings, as well as you know, Joe, you're a big supporter of these events as well. But obviously, under our new environment and in COVID, those conferences obviously have been restricted. And I think that's kind of really what we're kind of talking about today, and what's going on in the industry and how these types of meetings, whether they're a virtual event or some component of that, are still critical for folks to network and get out in front of that.
Yeah. And MedTech Strategist, while again, you and I run in the same circles, primary part of our business are the emerging technology startups who are usually bringing the disruptive and dislocating technology to the marketplace. Also in the audience, though, on both your readership as well as your conferences are the iconic players from the large strategics, whether it's Medtronic, Boston Sci, Stryker, J&J. So typically sitting on the podium, especially at the Dublin Show, and also the Phoenix show, right? And you've got another one in the Benelux region that you co-sponsor with. What are the shows that our viewers may not understand that you at least have part in?
Right. So our own meetings are obviously Dublin. We do a highly attended conference in Minneapolis with the folks from Medical Alley, who we have a great partnership with, and our San Francisco event that we do every year. That's around Palo Alto, with great supporters there, such as the Fogarty Institute and NEA and Lightstone and Wilson Sonsini. But we also co-partner on a couple of other events, the Phoenix CEO Summit, which is organized by Wilson Sonsini, but we are a part and original creators of that event, as well as Bohemia, which is held every December, and it's moved around Europe. And unfortunately, Joe, this year in December, it was supposed to be held in Milan, and I, for one, am extremely disappointed that I'm not able to go.
Yeah, there's
Are
always the
we
days
on?
before and the days after that are always a lot of fun with those shows.
Exactly.
So, like a lot of other organizations that are right in the heart of medtech, like you are, like we are, we've had to reimagine how does our organization address the emerging world that we're in today, and whether that's going to be the rigors du jour at least for another 6 to 12 months or beyond. You, beside the publications, it's so critical for you to be eye to eye, belly to belly, Guinness to Guinness, as you joked about earlier, in your shows. And so what has the strategist done in order to pivot on where we are today? And let's use the Dubliner show as an example, if you would. I think this is a great place for you to sort of reveal that to the audience.
Sure. Well, going back a few months ago, Joe, you and I had a very, candid conversation about this. Once COVID, had landed in Italy, we recognized that almost immediately. Our Dublin event is a very, very highly attended meeting. We watched that very closely and ultimately had to move that event into 2021. So folks that or organizations that have conference business, and it's not just within life sciences, it's everywhere. I mean, conferences are a way for people to get one-to-one FaceTime. And that is very difficult to replicate through a virtual event. I will say, I really commend a lot of organizations now that are trying to do that. AdvaMed, I would include in that. To put on a 3,000-4,000 person on-site event is no easy feat. The recalibration that AdvaMed has had to go through, over the past few months in order to do that, I really commend them for trying to, and they will pull that off. And we're excited to participate in that as we always do. And I know you're a part of that as well. For us in particular, we have watched sort of what's going on. And again, going back, you and I had this conversation a few months ago that, possibly by June, July timeframe, we would be out of this and things might start getting back to normal, and they're not. And so we kind of took it upon ourselves to really watch what other people are doing. And for us in particular, it's very important that if we are to take on a project, whether it's a conference or whatever it is that we decide to do, it is extremely important that we bring value to that. And our conferences are kind of run very differently, as you know. This is around startup companies that are looking for money. They have limited resources. We pair them with key investors and strategics. That's what we do. We are networkers. So if we cannot pull that off in a virtual meeting, then we will not do that. I mean, we owe that to the community, and we want to make sure that we have that higher value to what it is that we're bringing in knowledge.
And so I'm sure, you had sat and discussed this and said, okay, how are we going to do this? Who were the first people you reached out to? Because as you said, you've got a lot of members of your community. You've got the strategics, you've got the startups, you've got the venture people. So take me as much as you can. What was the first phone call? What was the first move? And what was the response?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is no question with our type of conferences, without the money in the room, whether it's a virtual meeting or it's an on-site meeting, we can't do these types of conferences. So venture capital and alternative financing is an extreme component to this. So our first step was to reach out to our core venture community. And we are very fortunate that we have a large following of those types of firms that either read our publication or have attended these conferences before. So our reconnaissance was to go out, talk with these investors, and we sent out a very basic communication that, we're toying with this idea, and would you support it? And we were amazed at the responses. It was more, not only, Kristy, will we support this event, but what can we do to help? What do you need from me? And that is rare. I mean, because of our conferences, we invite people to come, and, they come to these meetings and they know what to expect. but the offering to help and engage with these startups. I have been on dozens of calls over the last 2 weeks with European investors and US investors. Look, we know in this COVID world, we can't get to Europe, and Europe definitely can't come to the US. So if we pull together a virtual event and based around venture is willing to support this, then we feel that there's a need to do it. And definitely was the conversations where investors want to network with other investors. This is an important component to what we do, as you well know, at these cocktail receptions and dinner receptions that we do, where we're connecting investors with other investors, and we're connecting those investors with strategics and vice versa. So there was no question that the venture community will support this and that they're in for the long term. I heard a lot of responses of, Kristy, we're not just in this through 2020. We need to build out our portfolio. We need to look at some of these other technologies that are up and coming, that are developing because of COVID, but we also need to look at the same areas that we've had of interest and build that portfolio out.
And without dropping names, you had shared with me, and I wasn't surprised, the large strategics, they ponied right up as well, didn't they?
They did, and I can't say enough about that. I mean, again, to have support from companies like Medtronic, Olympus and J&J in particular, all of those are extremely important to us. They bring in a different perspective. And I would say one other thing, the theme here is that we have a lot to talk about. And whether you're a startup company or a venture firm, you really need to hear from those strategics also, as to how they've had to pivot, how they've had to change, what they are going through.
For those that have not been, because it is an intimate show, to either Twin Cities, San Francisco, and Dublin, would you share what is that format look like between the startups, the people in the audience, how long you have on the podium, and then what does that breakout session look like, and what are you working through right now, reimagining in a virtual world, how that may declare itself?
Sure, Joe. And again, I mean, for folks that are trying to, combat these ideas for their on-site conferences that they've been doing for years, this is difficult. It's not an easy thing. There's a lot of things to work through. And again, trying to bring value to a meeting is important as well. So our premise of all of our meetings has been the same. We invite a certain select number of startup companies that come and they apply to present. We accept them to be on the program. They have a 10-minute presentation followed by a networking break, and obviously partnering and setting up one-to-one meetings. The audience is made up of the folks that we're talking about. These are investors and strategics, other service providers that are into the industry that either want to network with those companies, either the startups or the strategics, right? So in order to create that through a virtual meeting, we actually have a lot more opportunity, is the way that I look at it. We're restricted in an on-site conference by a 2-3 day agenda, where we can only have certain amount of companies and certain amount of panel presentations and so forth. With a virtual meeting, we can do much more than that. And the one huge difference that we are doing is not doing it as a typical virtual meeting that, for me personally, have been seeing. It's I think already that a lot of people have virtual burnout, right? They're having to take time out of their schedule, sit 2 days for 8 hours in front of a computer and watch, presentation after presentation. We're not going to run it that way. So we believe that we can create a very open environment. We can have companies that would make, presentations. They can have multiple presentations. They can include video that shows their facility or shows, their process within their clinical trial. We can have sponsors and other folks as well as in the VC community that are really looking to engage that way through video in these one-to-one kind of pre-recorded sessions. So our idea is to create a virtual conference that's going to run over a series of time, if not even a couple of months, where folks will have the opportunity to sit and view presentations and sessions on their own schedule. Again, this is a very global meeting, right? So we've got time zones to think about. You've got possibly live sessions that you have to think about. So we want to give people enough opportunity to view these presentations on their own schedule, and then set up partnering that would last for over a week. It might even run into 2 weeks at this point. It really depends on the response. So we can give folks enough time to actually, set up these meetings and do these meetings based on their schedule.
Yeah, and that's unique. You pointed it out. I just sat through a conference for the last 2 days. That was a fabulous conference. But by the end of it, I was pretty torched in regards to sitting through all the presentations. So when you shared with me the proposed format here, I thought it was genius, and it was a really nice way to allow people to cherry pick, take their time, eat their ham sandwich, grab their cup of tea on the weekend, and really selectively go through that. So generally speaking, when an emerging tech startup gets time on the podium, what do they usually get? Is it 10 minutes, 12 minutes when they're presenting live?
10 minutes. Yeah, it's usually 10 minutes. And the reason for that, again, is because we're kind of inhibited by a program, right? By a program. We can only have enough time on the program to put everybody on. In this case, presenters or startup companies would still be able to do really any length of presentation that they wanted, but they would also be able to create multiple presentations. They could be, having their board, their advisory board, create, do an interactive kind of panel with our advisory board, or, some of their medical officers or other surgeons or doctors that are, supporting that technology. So there's multiple things that they can do with a virtual event, where on an on-site meeting, they're kind of restricted. That's kind of the way that we see it.
I really love this idea, and the more we were chatting about it is, gosh, I could bring in KOLs as if they were sitting right there, and they can give 7 to 10 minutes. Or I could sit with a chief commercial officer, or maybe a board member who gives their advice or insight as to things, where at the show, it was one person only getting up there, and you were sprinting typically for 10 minutes, and most people went over the red light that was blinking on them, right? So you know that.
We yank them off the stage, so you've seen that. We have a trap door underneath it. Okay.
Right, give them the hook. So how about you? What was the first thing you thought about when you hung up the phone? And we were chatting about it, like, how do I serve coffee in Dublin? How do I get a drink? All this value add that was in between the presentations, which was really maybe some of the reason most people went to that show, in addition to the content, that had to be devastating at first.
It is, Joe, and I've kind of have worked through some of those details as well. Like, look, I think that you and I are, the receptions in particular, like, nothing really takes the place of a live event. What a lot of the details with event happens are at those receptions. I mean, that's where deals get done. It's where people meet each other. I believe that's where you and I first met, was in Dublin, which is, hey, I know you. I think I know you too, so it was those kinds of things. How do you recreate that, virtual event? And you're absolutely right. I mean, anyone who's holding conferences right now, you are in contact with your hotel location, whether it's, Marriott or Hilton. There's all different things that are resulting out of this because of COVID. And how do you do that going forward? And so conferences will look very, very differently, even into 2021, with coffee and beverage and, no more buffets. I mean, things like that. And the hotel union and all of those hotels are really trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
For us in particular, if you're doing a conference, how do you recreate that? How do you recreate that camaraderie and, really sitting down with people like we do over cocktails and receptions? So we will be having a series of live cocktail receptions for this meeting that I'm kind of excited about. These are going to, involve some very kind of high level people that are really interested and willing to help and talk to, startup companies and give their feedback. These are going to be very candid conversations. We're going to run them live through the week of the partnering system. So you're going to see some really interesting people, and I think we'll have some really live discussions. I'm really looking forward to that part of it. We can only create it so far, but we are planning to do those kinds of receptions. Folks can key in and ask questions and chat with some of these these mentors and ask them real live questions as to what's going on within their environment and within MedTech.
Yeah, and I think the agile part of the people who make a decision to reimagine who they are, and the business you're in. It's just how are you going to do the business moving forward? So good for you. We know what you do. It's just going to change how you do. And I firmly believe, when you and I have had this digital conversation, and clearly I'm evangelistic about the digital world, this could be one of the blessings for an organization like MedTech Strategist. I think when 2022 comes around, we'll be back to an in-person scenario. I think organizations like the Strategist come out of this going, oh my gosh, we would have never did this if not but for, and I believe your value prop adds so much more to the industry, in addition to what it had done previous to the COVID. So, hats off to Dave, Steve, yourself, to sort of thinking this through, and how do we continue to keep this as one of the primary gateways to financing, acquisitions, and then, these entrepreneurs and startup people living out their dreams. So I'm super excited for you guys, and I'm so happy to be a part of it as well.
Well, Joe, we couldn't thank you enough. Again, the theme of this conference is we have a lot to talk about. And there are a lot of issues as you're addressing those every day, with your interviews and the key people that you're talking to. There is a lot of issues and things that we need to talk through within this industry. So we're excited to do it. More information will be coming shortly, and we look forward to having those really great candid discussions and listening to what people are really working through these problems right now. It's a knowledge-based conference, right? It's what we do. It's what you do. So. Yeah. Excited about it, so thank you.
Can you, without giving hard dates, can you give me approximate months at this point? Can I put you in that kind of corner right now?
Sure, absolutely. So we're looking to open up this virtual event around the first part of October. This will give folks that are, attend enough time over a 4-week period to really view those presentations, as we talked about before, on their own schedule and during their own time frame. We then will be opening up the partnering aspect of the meeting right before Thanksgiving. We might even keep it open, as I said, for a couple of weeks, maybe, through December, so give folks enough time to actually do those one-to-one virtual partnering meetings. And then we also will keep this open through December. So again, folks, after they have these one-to-one meetings, they'll be able to go back and revert back to those sessions or review that presentation, share that with their colleagues so they can, get the most of a virtual event. So starting October, partnering will be in November, and we'll go through December, and that's kind of the plan.
Super. This is exciting. So people now are not going to have to worry about what clothes they're going to bring to Dublin or San Fran or Twin Cities. They're going to have to worry about, how do I get a darn multimedia video presentation in time for this? So
exactly.
Yeah.
Do I do this on my phone?
Right. Do I do it in the front seat of my car? Right. So,
which I've taken some of those meetings, by the way. I mean, you probably have too. A few of these Zoom calls and pop in, and some, they're not driving, thank goodness, but
right.
Passenger seat, we're having this conversation. Like, is this a good time?
Right. That's true. Well, Kristy, as always, I love our conversations, and I really am thankful for everything that MedTech Strategist does for the industry.
Thank you, Joe, and you as well. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to working with it.
You got it. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again for being a guest on The Other Side.
Thank you.
This is Joe Mullings with The Other Side.